All right, kids. On today's episode of You're Doing Shit the Hard Way, let's go over subframes and dropping the subframe when doing work on a car. A lot of people are scared of doing it. They're not sure how to do it. A lot of people are doing turbo work and stuff from the top of the motor, and I'm telling you, it's so much easier to go up underneath and do it. Today, I'm taking the head off of this, so I've got to remove all this. Everything's got to come out of here to get that head off. I'm going to do some block inserts, 4B11 365H studs, and Cometic gasket, right? But to get that turbo out in the back and just to make everything simpler, I'm dropping the subframe. And we're gonna try to make this video as short as possible and go over it. I am using, listen, I'm cheating today and I'm using my quick jack just because, I like it and it works so much better. But you can do this job, and I've done it 100 times with nothing but a jack and some jack stands. All right, and all you got to do is, if you look underneath the frame right here, see this little oval, this little notch? Put your jack right here, front or back, but right here, put your jack here, jack the car up as high as your jack will go, and then come over here to this pinch weld and put a jack stand underneath that pinch weld and that one over there. And that's it. Have the front of the car up, and you can drop the subframe. You can use your jack when it comes time to lower the subframe down. But we're gonna go over some basics right here. First thing you want to do, there's multiple ways you can do the subframe and leave or take away as much of this as you want. Right, you can opt, if you don't have a lowering kit and you're not using camber bolts right here, you'll know because this camber bolt will have markings on it and usually a little tab. As long as you're not using camber bolts here and you're not lowered, you can take these two bolts out, remove your sway bar link right here, and then unplug this, and then you've got to remove your caliper. Remove your caliper, and I usually take a giant zip tie and just zip tie it through one of the bolt holes up here to the spring, and you got to pull the axles and drop this whole A-arm and hub assembly down. That's the hard way. If you're dropping the transmission out of the car, it may be the way you opt to do it. Just gives you more room and you're already pulling the axles anyway. But the easier way, there's a little cotter pin that's in here. Take the little cotter pin out and unscrew this nut till it gets to the very top, to where the top of the nut is flush with this, right? Because that's a tapered fitting, it's pressed up in there. So unscrew this nut until they're both flush and just tap this a little bit with a hammer. If you got a dead blow or a brass hammer, it's better, but either way, don't hit it hard, don't bend it, don't mess up your threads. But just tap that until it falls down, remove the nut, and then the steering link will fall out of the bottom, right? And then you got 3 bolts underneath. 2 bolts, or 1 bolt, and 2 nuts. These are splined. So when you remove these nuts, these bolts are jammed in there. From tightening this up, they're jammed in there, and they're a press fit. So remove this bolt completely, and then same thing you did over here on the top. Remove these nuts until they sit flush. Back them off until they sit flush here and here, right? And just tap up on them with a hammer until they move. And they're only maybe 1/8 of an inch pressed into there. There's not much, and it doesn't take much force. Don't mess up the threads. Again, back that nut off till it sits flush, tap them up, and those will come loose. And now this part of the subframe will come down, and the axle can actually stay up in there if you prefer. I pull the axle out and swivel it around to the back, but all this whole assembly will stay here. It makes the subframe much lighter, and you don't have to worry about alignment or anything like that. All right, third thing, normally there's a heat shield right here, and this customer's car is missing it for whatever reason, but there's 3 little nuts right here. There's a 10mm socket that you'll need, and it's this tiny little crescent moon shaped heat shield that sits right here. Just take these 3 nuts off, remove the heat shield, and then you're going to take these 2 rubber exhaust hangers off. Don't remove them from one side and try to swivel them up out of the way, because they will get in the way. Your exhaust is going to stay up there for the time being, and as you drop the subframe down, these 2 studs are going to come past the exhaust, and if you have these rubbers in the way or are mounted still to any part of this, they will hang up. There is clearance for the subframe to come down if you remove them. Other thing, these brackets right here, there's a bolt, 3 nuts, and a bolt. They're all 14mm head. You can take them off with an impact or ratchet, whatever you got. Take all 6 of these off, or all 5 of those off, drop this little bracket down and keep those. So there's one on this side as well. Super simple, comes down. You don't have to worry about realignment when you put it back up. Drop this down. While you're under here, come forward, take this motor mount bolt out. The motor is sitting in there right now mount it at the top. You can take this, remove this, and the motor will not go anywhere. It's a 17 and a 19 millimeter that you're going to need. Wrench, ratchet, impact, whatever you can use. Get this bolt, remove it, and then we'll go over the final step. If you have an Elantra in, this what I'm telling you right now goes for Veloster and Konas, right? But if you have a Elantra in, you're going to have an additional support that comes from here up to the front up here. But we'll go over that in a little bit. The Veloster and Kona N have 4 bolts / nuts that are going to have to come out for the subframe to come down. The Elantra has 2 more, and it's super simple, not much different. But I'll get up top and show you the second to final step. All right, back here in the back, behind where, let me see if I can see, behind where your ECU will normally sit right here. Let me zoom back out. Your battery will be sitting here. Your ECU will sit here. You will have to remove those. And there's 3 10 millimeter bolts that hold, or 10 millimeter head bolts that hold your ECU in place. Just unplug the 2 plugs, take those 3 bolts out, and remove it. You don't have to remove the battery tray or anything like I did. But right here behind them is this plug, right? And to remove that plug, there's a button on right here. See, this is a lever, and it swivels down. It unplugs similar to the way that the ECU does. But anyway, there's a button down here. You'll push that button, and then you'll swivel that lever down, and then that will come unplugged. Unplug that. That harness is connected to the subframe and the steering and everything like that. So you will have to unplug that and just leave it hanging. All right, next step. There is one small bolt. If you look way up in here, you'll see that if you turn the steering wheel, it's connected to that, right? That's your steering knuckle. See that little bolt right there on the bottom? Take that bolt out, and then when you remove that bolt, you can reach in there and just lift up on that steering knuckle, and it will slide right off of the shaft that keyed shaft that it's sitting on. All right, as you can see, I removed it. It's just hanging here. It goes way up there, right? If I can focus on that. But the steering shaft is down there. This can just hang here. Just don't turn your steering wheel. Once you disconnect that, leave your steering wheel here. I mean, if it pivots a little bit, that's fine. But if you ever go a full rotation, 360 rotation with that, you can install it back on there. And there are marks. There's a paint mark right here, and there's a paint mark on that as well, to where when you go to put it back on, you'll know exactly where to line them up. So you can't see it real well, but there is a distinct paint mark on both of them. But as long as you don't rotate your steering wheel 360 degrees, you'll be fine. If you do, the car will drive. As soon as you start to drive, it'll automatically start pulling left or right because your car thinks that you have the steering wheel turned in one direction and it's trying to correct itself. So just don't mess with the steering wheel after you pull that off. All right, quick recap. I didn't go over sizes. This is going to be a 19, and a good habit I like to get into is when I take a nut and a washer off of something, I screw it back on there instead of just putting it in a can or sitting on my table and trying to keep track of where everything goes. Take that off. Once you knock it out, screw it back on. Same thing with the tie rod ends. These are 17 millimeter. Take that off. As soon as you get it out, put the nut back on it. That way you don't have to keep track of shit, right? The plug in the top, you like I said, you can go through here is the easiest way. You can touch it right here. You can get to it from underneath if you decide to go that route, but much easier from behind the ECU. You're going to need a 12 millimeter to get to that bolt underneath, and then under here, I was mistaken on his. This is not a 17 and a 19. On mine it is because I've got an aftermarket bolt. His was a 17 and a 17. So you need that. These from this plate right here, these are 14 millimeters all the way across. This is 10 for the heat shield. The rubbers popped off, right? And these 3 are 17 millimeter. And you see, it looks like they're in there, right? It's not. They're just sitting in the hole right now. This bolt is out. You can see the motor flexes a little bit. Now, the only thing left that's holding this subframe up in place is this. It looks like a nut. It's actually a long bolt that goes up into the unibody of the car. But this is where that little plate back there goes to right here with the nut. So it has this little stem, but this is a very long bolt. This is a 19 millimeter. You'll have to take both of these off of each side here and then leave everything else except for, see this hole? That is to access that, which is another 19 millimeter nut. This is a stud that comes down. That stud stays on there, and it's used to align this as you're putting it back up. That's why the end is rounded. But this is just a pipe that's welded on here, and you use this stud as alignment when you're going back up. But that is a 19 millimeter. You got one on the opposite side. The easiest way to get to this is with a long extension. Right there. Got this long extension and a deep well 19 millimeter, and just stick it up into that hole. Use an impact, ratchet, whatever you got, and pull those two out. And then before you pull all of these out, have a jack sitting up underneath here. I like to use a motorcycle jack. If you've got one, it's great because it's flat and it supports it from rocking back and forth in every direction. If you don't, just put a jack under it. Put it towards the front up here because there's more weight on the front than there is the back. But just have a jack supporting this. Pull these 4 bolts out, and then I'll show you here in a second what that looks like just to drop the subframe. All right, the 4 bolts are out, and as you can see, I got a motorcycle jack up underneath supporting the subframe right now. 4 19 millimeters is what it is, and like I said, if you have an Elantra in, you're gonna have that one brace that comes up here to the front with one more 19 millimeter bolt in the front on each side. Super simple, doing everything exactly the same. As you let this down, the subframe's gonna come down. Just make sure as you come down to make sure everything is loose. The other side is hung up just a sec. Like that. Make sure everything's nice and loose. As you lower it down a few inches, keep checking. But honestly, boom, that's the subframe. Now, I'll show you what it looks like underneath, and how much room you'll have to work. All right, there's your subframe. Nothing to it. And then under here, this is where that steering linkage went up that you disconnected the knuckle from. And look at all the room that you have to work from. You can get your hot pipe off, you can get your down pipe off, flex pipe, all of this. And once you do, your turbo is right there, and you will be able to get this heat shield out, and all of your turbo bolts can be accessed from down here. Everything that you need to get that turbo, and this huge hole right here is where it's going to be coming down through. More than enough room, no binding, no nothing, just access for days. And like I said, it's just so much easier. I think start to finish, even including videoing, I've got about 20 minutes in pulling the subframe out after removing the tires. So from the time I started videoing until now has been about 20 minutes. And if I wasn't videoing, it'd have been about 10, 15. So easy to drop the subframe, get underneath here and do all this work, and it all goes right back together just as easy. Just for anybody, and besides, when you get done, you can tell everybody, yo, I dropped a subframe, and they'll be impressed, right? You impress your friends and make your life a hell of a lot easier. Cut hours off of your work just by dropping it.